Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. This is Nowhere Left to Hide, exposing financial services fraudsters who hide in plain sight. A little bit of housekeeping items. We will be recording today's session. You'll get a link after the session is done, and then you can rewatch this if you need to. We're also going to be taking questions as well, so please enter your questions and we will be answering them. If we don't answer your question on air during the session, we will be following up with you. For today's speakers, we have Mr. John Wilson. John is a senior fellow and part of the threat research team here at Fortra, and myself, Antonio Sanchez. A little bit about our agenda. We'll do a quick overview on email security strategy. We're going to talk about a couple of scenarios that we hear from different financial institutions on a regular basis on how they engage employees. And we'll get into a little bit about ways that you can help fight the scammers. But first, brief overview. As security professionals, you probably have all 5 of these functions as part of your security strategy. Prevention of email from making it into the environment, so stopping that at the very edge whenever you can with technologies such as DMARC enforcement to be able to stop email spoofing, as well as domain monitoring to be able to stop lookalike domains. Of course, from a protection perspective, there's the gateways, your spam filters, security controls to detect malicious files, URLs, and business email compromise. The intention, obviously, is to try and stop the malicious traffic before it hits the inbox. But as we all know, the bad guys have gotten better. They've got much better, and there's going to be some stuff that actually is going to slip through and get into the inbox. So there's an element of training where you train your employees to be vigilant about the latest techniques and encourage them to be able to report things. However, you also want to be sure that you're encouraging your clients or your customers to be able to say something as well. I've been on 5 sites of different financial institutions right before this session, and I noticed that most of them have some sort of messaging in there to be able to respond to the financial institution when they see something that looks a little bit suspect. And that's fantastic. That's exactly the kind of stuff they want to use because, as we're going to see here in just a few moments, scammers are not only engaging your employees, but they're also engaging your customers, so they're attacking you from two different fronts. Of course, there's varying levels of visibility in terms of how they're reporting things. So one thing you might want to think about is whether or not you move your message as far as having your customers report things. Some people have it on the very front landing page of their website. Some people you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper into, but that's actually up to you. But it's great to see that organizations are thinking about their customer base and wanting them to be able to say something or have the ability to say something whenever they think something is suspect. And again, there's going to be times where something does happen and you're going to have a plan of action to be able to respond and, of course, remediate whatever the issue is. And the sooner you can remediate, the better. And, of course, as we all know, this is all a cycle because ideally every single one of these functions right here is going to build on each other to make the next thing or the previous things smarter to be able to have better protection on and on and on. Like I said, everybody pretty much is going to do these things. And the good news is, you're blocking the phishing attempts, but the bad news is the scammers are going to continue their constant attempts because there's zero risk because there's no repercussions for them. So one of the things that we want to make sure that you understand as we go through this is that in order to be able to shed a light on the scammers and where they operate and how they operate, we need to keep in mind that the scammers use the same resources that the rest of us do. They need to have a landing page. That's part of their phishing attempt, their lookalike website. So they've got to work with a hosting provider to be able to register a domain and create their website as part of the phishing attack campaign. They need to have emails because that's how they reach out to your employees and as well as your customers as well. So they're using one of the readily available email services, free email services that are out there. And of course, they need to have a way to be able to cash in as well as cash out. So they're opening up bank accounts, multiple bank accounts with multiple financial institutions to be able to move money around as part of their scam. So again, they're using the same resources that we are. And what we're trying to do is actually change the risk reward equation when it comes to dealing with the scammers. So a moment ago, I mentioned that if a scammer tries a phishing attempt on one of your employees and your employee doesn't fall for it, he reports it to the security team or he just deletes it and blocks it. That's great. That person didn't fall for the fish. Unfortunately, there's really no consequence for the scammer. They just try again with another person, or they'll just rewrite the email and just try it again. So there's really no pain on the part of the scammer. They're just going to keep trying and trying and trying and trying. It's good that you're blocking it, but wouldn't it be better if now we can be more proactive and start making it more costly for the scammer to try and continue with their attempts. In other words, the idea is for every failed attempt, now they're incurring some sort of a penalty. Now they're losing email addresses that they use for their attack campaigns. Now they're losing the phishing websites. They're losing the bank accounts. We're disrupting the operation so that way they can't just come back and try again. Ideally, we want to find out exactly who they are and potentially just completely shut it down. That would be the ideal world. But the concept is, if we can be more active with our defenses, so that way we're actually punishing, or there's a consequence now that's happening to the scammer. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to show you a little bit more about what we do at Fortra as it relates to trying to learn more about the scammers, learning how they operate, and trying to disrupt their operations. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Mr. John Wilson, that's going to go into a few scenarios here.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Antonio. So I'm going to talk first about the scenario where the scammer is engaging an employee. This actually certainly impacts financial services. This type of attack, also known as business email compromise, this impacts actually every industry across the board. On the upper left, we have an example message. We have changed the names to protect the innocent here, but it's essentially what we refer to as a payroll diversion attack. Someone is impersonating an employee, and they're sending an email to someone in the payroll team saying that they'd like to update where they received their direct deposit. The message on the lower left happens to be in German, but essentially says, "Good morning, what's our current account balance? Could we pay a 37,000 euro payment today?" And here they're actually impersonating an executive of this company. So what do we do about this? Well, it all starts with a vigilant employee, somebody who perhaps has been through that security awareness training, who recognizes that something's not quite right about this message. And what they do is they report that activity. Now, here at Fortra, we have a team known as the Fish Labs Suspicious Email Analysis Team. It essentially, their sole purpose in life is to take messages reported by employees across our customer base who say, "Hey, I think this might be some sort of a phishing attack." And that team will essentially categorize the message into one of four categories. The first, and actually, sadly, the most popular category, is false positive. Yes, the more you train your users, the more likely they are to report a potential threat, but users don't always get it right. And so a fair number of those, anywhere from 60 to 75% typically, will turn out to actually not be a malicious message. But then our suspicious email analysis team will review the message, look at all sorts of different indicators and hints within the message, and come to a conclusion and classify it either as a link-based attack, a payload-based attack, such as malware, or a response-based attack, where the call to action is to actually respond, either by responding to the email, or perhaps by picking up the phone and placing a call, or perhaps by sending a text message, scanning a QR code, something else that actually requires a physical response. Now, once we get that, we interact with the scammers, and we do our best to obtain as much intel out of them as possible, including things like the email addresses they're using, any domains they may have registered in furtherance of this scam, as well as, of course, those bank accounts that they're going to utilize to cash out. And we take that information, and not only do we use it internally to strengthen our products so that we have a better chance of blocking these messages at the very far front end, of that circle. But we also take those indicators and we share them with the folks that can do something about it. If you think back to when Antonio explained how the scammers have to ultimately use the same online resources that we do. They have to use a bank account. They have to use an email address. They need to use registrars and hosting providers. We will share the email addresses with the webmail provider that hosts that email so that they can get that account shut down. We share the mule accounts with the financial services industry as well as with law enforcement so that they can take action on that account. And that could range from, monitoring the account for suspicious activity or perhaps even shutting it down outright. Now, the key here, doing this 1 or 2 times can have a very small minimal effect. But we want to do this at scale. And so let me show you an example. But before we get started, there are a few gotchas here. Because this started as a message going to an employee at one of our customers, we have to sanitize that initial message because we don't want to implicate that victim. If we were to respond as that originally intended victim, our experience has shown us that they will be targeted with more and more and more scams. So we actually want to separate this whole engagement that we have from that original intended victim. Next, we also have to stay on the good side of the law, if you will. Much as I would love to go and infect the scammer's computer or infect their phone, we can't do that. That would be illegal, and we have to stay, obviously, on the correct side of the law. So here's an example. This is an actual original message from a scammer. We did actually change the names here just for the purposes of our webinar, but it was forwarded by the intended victim, who in this case would be Brittany Smythe. And the message alleges to come from Christopher Jones, who is an employee at this company. And he says, "Hi, Brittany, I have a new bank account. I'd like to change my direct deposit details. Can I just send you the bank details via email? I want this to go into effect for the next payroll." Now, here's the problem. If we were to simply respond to this, well, the attacker's email signature gives away who they were pretending to be. We also have this warning banner that was added by the gateway at our customer, and it's quite possible that that is somewhat unique, and perhaps somebody could recognize from that warning banner who the originally intended company might be. So we have to remove those things. So what we do, we remove those. You can see now we've made it look like the original message was to us, Janet, and that the original message was from someone called Lawrence Mason. Now, you may wonder how this actually works. How does the scammer not know who they are? Well, it's because they use the same accounts and they send many thousands of emails every day. So when they get a response, they're just happy to have a response. They don't go back and check, hey, wait a minute, did I really email this individual in the first place? So we write back, hello, Lawrence, I can assist you with that change. I'll need your new account, transit, and institution numbers. By the way, these are the details used for a Canadian bank account. Since they had originally impersonated a Canadian employee, we wanted to write back asking for Canadian details. And so they write back, and sure enough, thanks for your help. And they give us, in this case, a go-to bank. This is a prepaid debit account that's in the U.S., which, of course, doesn't meet what we had said we needed, right? We needed Canadian bank account details. Nonetheless, we record this account because we know that the scammer has control of this account and is going to try to leverage it, not just in this scam, but in many, many other scams. And so we share it with law enforcement and also with our financial services customers. Then we write back and we say, hey, you can't use a non-Canadian bank account for direct deposit. It's against Canadian Revenue Agency regulations. And sure enough, the scammer says, oh, no problem. And now they give us a Bank of Montreal. I guess they're going by BMO today. And indeed, they have given us the appropriate Canadian details for an account at BMO. Well, that's great, but we haven't learned a whole lot yet. We've learned 2 bank accounts. We know the email address they're using, and we know what type of scam they were trying to pull. But let's try to get a little more information. So what we do is we send back a message that looks like we've sent them a secure message. And it says, I need you to review the attached form. If there's no issues, return a signed copy to me. Well, obviously, if they want the scam to work, they're going to have to respond to us. And to respond to us, they're going to need to download that form. This drives them to a website that we control. And they can see the size of the file. And to encourage them to get this done, we show how many downloads they have remaining. And that thing keeps ticking down every time they make some sort of a mistake. Well, the first mistake they might make is as soon as they click the link, we say that we need to know their location. Now, this is not the location we would get from the IP address. That we've already had throughout our engagement with the scammer. Rather, this is the geolocation. And if they happen to be using a mobile device, it is highly accurate. But even on a desktop computer, that is often quite accurate, will get us certainly within a few blocks of where the scammer is. Now, most scammers, when they first see this page, immediately hit block. Obviously, they don't want us to know where they are. But if they do that, we say that their request for location services was denied. And this would be something that would cause that remaining to decrement over time. And eventually, however, they will enable that. They'll do what they have to get the document, and we send them what looks like a rather realistic document, asking them to review it, sign it, date it, send it back. Now, the document is branded based on where the victim's country actually is, as well as based on the language used. We currently support 6 languages. Of course, we can always manually write back in whatever language we want, but as far as one click, we support 6 languages. And we have documents not just for payroll diversion, but we have them for wire transfers, ACH transfers, e-transfer, Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, Interact, Western Union, you name it. Every type of scam out there, we have a fake document that we can use as a lure to get the scammer to expose their geolocation and some additional information about themselves. And so each of those clicks generates some data, and some of that is extremely accurate. Here we have located someone in South Africa within 35 meters of their location. And in fact, we can say with great confidence that the scammer was most likely located inside of this particular building at the time they were conducting their scam.
Hey, John,
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. There's a question. It's actually pretty timely. They're
absolutely.
this is all, we're changing the names to protect the innocent, but do we find out if the scammer was actually caught, or do we actually ever find that out? Can you
Oh,
share what you're allowed to share with this?
absolutely. So that's an excellent question. Most of the time, we do not hear back from either the banks or law enforcement as to what they've actually done with the information. We know there was recently a big Interpol crackdown, and we know that they leveraged some of our data in those efforts, but they don't specifically tie back, we arrested this scammer based on this particular data point. Now, that said, we've had a few instances over the years where we've developed the case a little bit further, and we've actually managed to get 3 folks arrested in South Africa. They turned out to be Nigerian nationals conducting scams in South Africa, and through a variety of different means, we were able to identify who they were, and then we worked closely with the United States Secret Service, and actually they were able to arrest them. This was shortly before COVID started, and these guys spent most of the COVID pandemic incarcerated in South Africa awaiting trial. So even if they get out and were just given time served, they still ended up spending 3 or 4 years, behind bars as a result of that. I do want to make it clear, Antonio, that is not the typical outcome of these, but boy, do we feel good when we actually take kind of that ultimate bite out of crime, which is to, take that scammer off the street. So I mentioned that we need to do this at scale. And obviously, that one engagement was great. We got 2 bank accounts. We got an email address shut down. We figured out that they were located in Cape Town, South Africa, and probably work in that building. But we actually receive about 10,000 scammer email messages every month. Now, obviously, to deal with that load, although we do have, actual humans, hands on keyboard, about 53% of the scams we're able to auto close out based on a set of automation rules. So, for example, some types of attacks like an advanced fee fraud, we simply recognize that that's what it is. We gather what intel we can, and we just close it out and move on. Of the remaining 47% of messages, 80% of those we generate automatically with just a slight hint from the operator. The operator simply says, run this particular workflow on them, and then the rest kind of takes over automatically. That final 20% of the 47% are the ones that kind of require the most work. They typically would be sort of newer scams, scams maybe that we're not quite sure where they're headed yet, and so we really need a human involved to do that. Since we started doing this in 2019, we've actually, identified more than 11,000 bank accounts, and we've reported those again to the financial services industry as well as to law enforcement. And we've gotten more than 18,000 webmail accounts shut down since 2019. Now, when you think about that, it's not just that we shut down, 18,000 webmail accounts that were, attempting to scam one particular person. Every one of these accounts, they're sending out hundreds, if not thousands of messages every day. Any other threads they had in progress when that message gets shut down is essentially they have to kind of start back from square one. And so that can have a much larger impact than simply one message or one particular scammer. Every month we put out a number of reports, so we keep track of how many messages we're sending out, how many were attacker messages versus the ones we as defenders send back. We track how the scammers are cashing out, what mechanism they're using, whether it's a payroll diversion or perhaps they're doing vishing or credential phishing. We'll track the webmail providers used by business email compromised scammers. By the way, Google, certainly the most popular webmail platform out there, it is also extremely popular with scammers, so no huge surprise there. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Now, as financial services companies, you don't just have to worry about your employees. You are somewhat unique, not entirely unique. There are other industries where this happens, but financial services in particular, your customers are often hit with various types of phishing. In other words, scammers are pretending to be your organization, reaching out to your customer, trying to essentially get access to their bank account so they can move the money out of that account and do other nefarious things. And so I'm going to walk you through a scenario, and this one is actually quite personal to me. I was sitting at a beer garden. Don't worry, it was after 5 o'clock. At least it was after 5 o'clock somewhere. I was sitting there, and I got this text. Now, we have sanitized this to get rid of the name of the original bank that was being impersonated. I'll let you use your imagination as to what bank it might be, but it could be certainly any one of the retail banks out there. The alert simply said that I'd been charged $942, but that had been put on hold, and if it wasn't me, I should visit a particular URL. Actually, it looked pretty good. I mean, if I didn't do this for a living, it's possible I might have been a little intrigued and a little confused by this, and who knows, maybe I would have clicked. Well, as it turns out, if you go here, you are presented with a series of screens. The first thing, of course, they want is your username and password. They then say, we need to verify you, so let's get started. Now they want your phone number, your social security number, your date of birth. Gee, why might they want that information? Well, hey, that's what you need to go commit identity theft. So that's pretty darn handy. It's also probably what you would need if you were going to call into the bank and say, yeah, I need to make a change to my account. The bank is going to ask, well, what's your social security number? What's your date of birth? What's the phone associated with the account? So again, the scammer now has that information. Next, they're asking for the credit card number, expiration date, CVV, and the ATM PIN. Honestly, I'm a little surprised why they weren't asking for the debit card. That seems to have made more sense. Nonetheless, all of these are useful details to the scammer that they could probably leverage, sell online, or use themselves. And here's where it gets scary. The very last step is they tell you that they're going to send you an authorization code to your phone. Remember, they asked your phone number back a few pages ago. So what's actually happening here is the scammer has an interface, sort of an administrative interface on this website, and they're watching live as people log in. And then what they're doing is they're taking that username and password that was entered on the very first page, and they're simply going and they're entering that username and password, and then it says, hey, we just sent you a code, we need the code. Well, that's the perfect time to essentially tell the person to enter the code we just sent you. And I guess you can all imagine what happens at this point. Now, the scammer simply takes the code because it wasn't entered at the bank, it was entered through this fake website. The scammer takes that code, enters it in, and now they're into the account. Just they've effectively socially engineered the victim, not only out of their username and password, but also out of that multi-factor code. So next, I rolled up my sleeves. I actually was able to download the fish kit. That's a whole other presentation for another day. But this particular scammer had made a couple of mistakes. They left the phishing kit in the form of a zip file. That allowed me to get a lot of additional information out of them. But simply using publicly available information, what we call OSINT or open source intel, I was able to do a few things. First of all, I was able to go and look up their, do a whois lookup on the domain that they were utilizing. However, I immediately discovered this information was probably not all that useful. There were some red flags. For example, the address provided for the technical content, or sorry, the registrant name, was an empty lot down in Los Angeles. It was right next to an elementary school. When I looked up the name on Google, I mean, you can Google my name. You won't even actually find me until you get to about page 3 or 4 because I have such a common name. But you can put anyone's name in the world in, and it's probably going to find at least one page about them. Amazingly, not a single person with this name, Johnny Culligan, and Google offered to correct that for me. And lastly, they have a nice San Francisco phone number, 415 area code, but if you count the digits there, there's a little problem. There's one too many digits in that phone number. So net, we probably can't get much of anywhere with whois information. Or can we? We were actually able to work with a third-party vendor who gave us data on using a reverse whois. In other words, show me everything that was registered using that very same email address. Show me everything registered using that same phone number. And it turns out they weren't just attacking our bank here. They were attacking, it looks like Patelco, Netflix, DHL, Chase, Wells Fargo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all about shining a light on the scammer, taking that one tiny little bit of information that we got from the very beginning, in this case, from that URL that they had sent in the SMS, and using it to shine a light and recognizing that, hey, there are other sites out here. This particular phisher is attacking all of these different brands. All right. I'm going to pass it back now to Antonio to talk a little bit about with the data that we collect through this process and how we at Forter actually utilize that to try to shine a light and ultimately try to mitigate some of the damage done by these scammers.
Yeah, thanks, John. That was pretty interesting and pretty scary actually as well. Because again, the scammers are targeting your employees and they're targeting your customers, which is why we were talking about at the beginning. You want to ensure that that you have awareness training and you're reminding the different people that interact with your organization that when they see something, say something. But the whole purpose here is to kind of demonstrate that we get all of this information from all of these different scammers here. We learn a lot about them, and there's things that we actually do with it because at the end of the day, we want to improve our products themselves and feed it with the newfound indicators that we've collected with this. But at the same time, we're out there, we're helping our customers as well. So the email addresses, for instance, not only are we're updating our security controls, but we're reporting those to the email service providers as well as law enforcement. Same thing goes with the geolocation data. We're sharing that information with the different financial institutions as well as the local law enforcement. With the domains, we're working with the registrars and getting those domains shut down. The bank accounts, we talked about getting those, and we report those to law enforcement as well as the financial institutions themselves. And the financial institutions are going to decide whether they want to take action and close it or whether they want to put a different level of monitoring on those accounts so they can learn even more themselves about what the scammers are using and how the scammers are using their accounts and following wherever the trail leads them. And of course, with the URLs that we're getting, we broadcast those to get those shut down as well. These are the specific activities that we're doing specifically to interrupt the operations of the scammers. We want to now give them some consequences for engaging with us. and being able to disrupt them and increase their costs, because these are fewer emails and domains and bank accounts that they can use as part of their nefarious activities, as part of their attack campaigns. And as John mentioned earlier about the number of things that we've seen out there, every single one of these that they shut down, whenever those are linked to other attack campaigns, those things get shut down as well. So if we go back to kind of our little circle of having your strong email security strategy, and everybody is somewhere with the evolution of their security strategy, whereas regardless of what kind of security control there is. Now, we have a fantastic broad portfolio of products that we can help you strengthen any part of this portfolio here. But specifically, the thing that John just covered in these scenarios here are going to be with the respond category, as well as with the remediate and the prevent category. The reason I call those out specifically is because in the respond category, this is where all the threat intelligence comes from. This is where all the threat investigation, where you talk about the hands on the keyboard, come in to engage the scammer and see what we can learn about them. And this is how we start to shed a light on the fraudsters. We actually start to shed a light on them back in the training section here in section 3, because you're training your employees to be vigilant. You're training your customers to be vigilant. That if they see something, say something. Well, we don't necessarily know if it's something yet, but at the same time, it's good hygiene that they're actually doing that. Where we really start to shed a light on them and expose them is in the threat investigation phase, which is in respond, and then the remediation, which is, again, we're taking these new indicators, we're applying them to the products, we're finding out these domains that are being used, and we're shutting down those domains as well. So we're preventing other campaigns from using those domains as well. And if there's any part of this that you'd like to talk about to strengthen your portfolio, we absolutely love to have a conversation with you. But there are things that you can do to help, because as we all know, security is a team game. We are a community. We're all fighting the same bad actors here. So what you can do to help is educate your friends and family about the scams. Every single one of us probably knows somebody who's either fallen for one of these scams or they got one of these, and you have to tell them, don't engage with these because this is what's going to happen. I myself have a family member who engaged with one of those scams, and now they're constantly being targeted even more because they're probably on a list somewhere where the bad actors know that this person, fell for a scam a while ago. But again, fortunately, we caught it in time such that it wasn't detrimental to them. But still, now they're getting them on a much more regular basis. Other things you can do: we have a free trial of our Money Mule feed. So if you want to sign up for that, we've got the email address there at the bottom where we can sign you up for a free trial of that. And of course, we'll also even investigate your BEC attack messages. So send those over as well. You can contact us at activedefense@fortra.com to get started. If you're interested in that Money Mule feed, or you want to just go ahead and send us your BEC attack messages, we can do the technical part when it comes to all this stuff. But again, we can only do so much. We need your help to surface these things, because at the end of the day, we're all fighting the same scabbers. We all want to shed a light on them. We want to know how they operate, and we want to actually take the hurt back to them and disrupt their operations. So we've actually gotten to the Q&A section here. We do have a handful of seed questions.
I actually see a question here, Antonio. So someone is asking,
okay, great, let's go first.
Yeah, absolutely. What is fraudcasting? And I can take that one.
Okay.
So
great.
if you've ever clicked a link and gotten a big red screen, either on Google or perhaps on using Microsoft's browser, may say something along the lines of the site that you're attempting to visit is malicious. It may try to steal your personal information. It may try to infect your computer. We recommend you don't go there. If you wish to, a couple mouse clicks later, you can kind of get around that. If you're hell bent on having your information stolen, but generally those do a very good job. So the service on the Google side is called Google Safe Browsing. On the Microsoft side, it is called Microsoft Smart Screen. So the first thing we do when we have confirmed that a URL actually is malicious, that it is a phishing site or perhaps is a malware drop site, we will broadcast it to Google and Microsoft so they can get the warning out instantaneously to someone who might fall for it and click that link. But we don't stop there. First of all, not everyone is using one of those browsers, a browser from Google or from Microsoft, and we want to protect more than those folks. And also, you are going to get those folks that, despite that big red warning, they are going to go and find that proceed anyway link and go there. And so then we work with behind the scenes, we work with the registrars, the hosting providers, et cetera, to get those sites knocked offline.
Actually, I just saw a message come in here. Can you go back one slide? Because someone's asking if they can see that email to send the BEC scam message. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, it's activedefense@fortra.com. Stay on the screen because there's actually another great question that's in here somebody sent over.
Sure.
They're asking about the law enforcement agencies that we work with. I think you mentioned Interpol a second ago, but are there others that you're allowed to mention on the ones that we work with?
Sure. So we work with the FBI. We work with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Yes, we've worked with Interpol. One of the organizations we share data with is the U.S. Secret Service. And then lastly, the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance. I'm actually wearing one of their shirts today. I don't know if it's probably cut off. You can't see the whole thing. But that's an organization that many of you probably do participate in. And we share information with the NCFTA.
Okay, great. There's another question here about phishing sites takedowns. They're asking if we do that or if we have customers do that, or can you describe that a little bit? I guess that'd be just good to talk about, like when we actually discover it and how they're taken down.
Absolutely. So it really starts with this huge funnel, if you will. In the top side, we just throw in every possible URL that we come across, good, bad, indifferent, etc. We have a series of crawlers that go and we have some technology to keep those crawlers from getting blocked. This is one challenge. The more sophisticated phishing websites are aware of companies like Fortra and others who are out there doing research. And if they detect that someone is accessing that site potentially is a security researcher, they will actually just send you somewhere completely, they'll just redirect you to like the Google homepage, for example. Obviously, that's not good because it doesn't allow us to see what the typical victim would. So we have a rather large infrastructure that enables us to blend in with normal traffic, look like a real potential victim. We have some automated things that will essentially score each of these and tell us if it's likely to be a phishing site. The ones that hit a certain score go to an analyst for review, and then that analyst is able to confirm, yes, indeed, that's a phishing site. No, it's not just some promotional thing that was put up. A lot of times, for example, you will have an airline or a hotel will partner with a bank to issue a credit card. So somebody might think that's phishing, but it turns out it's not. So we do that bit of research there. Once that is finally confirmed to be a phish, we immediately broadcast it to Microsoft and Google, and then becomes the efforts to get that shut down. And we have a number of ways we do that, and it really depends on what is the nature of the threat. A lot of times it's as simple as somebody has a WordPress blog, they did not change the default password, they get hacked, and the person running that blog has absolutely no idea that they're hosting, a Wells Fargo phish and a PayPal phish and a Netflix phish all, underneath their page. For those, we would typically reach out initially to the domain owner. If we don't get a good response there, we reach out to the hosting provider, and if need be, we'll go all the way to the registrar. Obviously, if the entire site is bad, where you just simply land on the page, and a good example would be that one, that smishing example that I had earlier. In that case, we would start directly with the registrar and see if we can get that taken down. And a lot of it has to simply do with the relationships that Fortra has with these infrastructure providers. And so, and that varies. With some folks, we have an API. For some of the folks, we actually have what we call kill switch integration. As soon as we say it's bad, it's killed. We wish we had that with everybody, but that, of course, doesn't always, we aren't always able to establish quite that level of trust with folks. But the API integration is quite quick. Some of the slower ones will involve emails back and forth, and there are a few countries that actually require physical postal letters to be sent. Those, of course, are the slowest to be taken down.
Okay, great. We're actually at time here, so if you want to go ahead and jump to the last slide, but John, that was terrific. I hope this was helpful for the audience, for the people that have been on. Again, we've got that email in there. Again, if you're interested in sending us your BEC, what you believe are the BEC messages, or if you're interested in that money mule feed. Thank you for being on. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this is enlightening so you can be able to understand how you might need to evolve your email security strategy. Obviously, we'd love to be able to talk to you and help you with being able to do that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. John, thank you for being on today. My name's Antonio, and have a great rest of your day.